If you or somebody you know is in removal proceedings, then this video is for you, because we're going to be talking about a trick that ICE is using to detain people at their immigration court hearings, which is really sending a chilling effect down the immigrant community's spine. And it's discouraging people from showing up to immigration court. And by the way, if you don't show up to immigration court, you automatically get a removal order, which would allow ICE to detain you anyway. So that's not the best strategy. If you're in immigration court proceedings, the way to go is to make sure you have an attorney. What's happening is the Department of Homeland Security is working, well, the DHS attorneys who are in immigration court are collaborating with the ICE officers. And when someone is in removal proceedings, it's difficult to detain them. I mean, you can detain them, but it's generally a bad use of the government's resources, because you detain them, but they still have a right to the hearing. So you have to transfer the case from the undetained judge to a detained judge. You have to house them and accelerate the immigration court proceedings. So ordinarily, ICE doesn't detain people who are in removal proceedings unless they have criminal history or some sort of red flag that makes the case a higher priority. This isn't always the case, by the way. You could totally get detained if you're in removal proceedings for no reason at all, and then you have to apply for a bond redetermination and try to get released. But what ICE is doing for people who've been here for less than 2 years, those people would ordinarily be subject to something called expedited removal, where the ICE officer can just sign a piece of paper that causes you to be removed or deported from the United States. But they can't initiate expedited removal proceedings when you are in ordinary removal proceedings in front of an immigration judge. So what they do now is, in some instances, and this has happened in a bunch of major cities around the US, including New York, is during the immigration court proceeding, the DHS officer will ask the judge to dismiss the removal proceedings. And they totally have the right to do this because DHS is the one who filed the charges of removability, so they can just dismiss the charges and say, like, we don't want this person to get a removal order in front of this immigration judge anymore. And the immigration judges will ordinarily grant that request to dismiss. And then the moment the respondent, the client, leaves the courtroom, ICE officers will just be there and say, you need to come with us. And then they'll detain them, send them to a detention facility, and then begin expedited removal proceedings. And within a couple weeks, they'll try to deport that person from the United States instead of just letting the removal proceedings play out, allow the person to apply for asylum and all the stuff that they're otherwise entitled to. So this is a huge problem. I actually just saw in one of the attorney groups, private groups, one of the attorneys requested, well, what happened was the DHS attorney asked the judge to dismiss the case. The client's attorney, the respondent's attorney, asked the judge for 10 days, a brief continuance, a brief adjournment to discuss the matter with their client and figure out what they want to do. The judge granted it. The client leaves the courtroom. ICE officers are there saying, like, hey, this case got dismissed. Your client needs to come with us. And the attorney said, no, it didn't get dismissed. We got another court date in 10 days. And so the ICE officers actually backed off in that instance because there wasn't a dismissal of the removal proceedings, and the client has a few more days to figure it out with their attorney what their actual plan is going to be. But they know pretty clearly now that when they show up to court a few days later for the next hearing, the case is going to get dismissed, and once they walk out of that courtroom, ICE officers are going to be there to detain the client and begin their expedited removal proceedings. On a rarer note, I've also heard some instances of ICE officers detaining people at ICE check-ins who have a court date scheduled. So they're in ordinary removal proceedings. ICE officers detain them at their check-in, and we don't exactly know what the plan is. So what we've speculated, and by we I mean the immigration lawyer community, is that they plan to change the venue of the case from the non-detained immigration court docket to the detained court docket, and to either, once it's transferred, get the judge to dismiss the case so that ICE officers can begin expedited removal to quickly remove the person from the United States, or have the person fight their case in the detained docket, which when people are detained, it's not fun. You're way more likely to abandon your case and request voluntary departure, or just, agree to be removed from the United States and not continue challenging your case. So it's a way for ICE officers to put a ton of pressure on someone to accept deportation. And if you're free and just going about your life and you have a court date every 6 months, deportation sounds like a terrible idea. But if you're in a jail for a few months and your life is just miserable, deportation is, might be more appealing. And I've seen this play out for clients back in the day when I used to handle detained cases. There was a lot of attrition, like people would just give up and say, you know what, I'd rather go back, and even though my life is in danger, I'd rather go back and try to make my way to another country where I might be able to safely live. And they would sometimes end up abandoning their asylum claims in the US just because they're detained. If you know anybody personally who's been detained at their court appearance or with a court date pending, I would love to know about it in the comments section below. I'm trying to compile a list of all of the examples of when people get detained and under what circumstances, so that I can just do a better job making videos in the future to advise people about what the risks are with certain courses of action. If you're interested in learning more about policies and just changes to immigration under Trump, be sure to subscribe. If you personally need any assistance with a family-based immigration matter or naturalization, you could schedule a consultation with me. My information is in the video description below, and I'll see you guys next time for another video.